Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well today. Just a little disclaimer at the beginning of the video. Um, I am still getting over a sinus infection. I've had to start and stop this video a couple of times already because I've gone into a coughing fit. Um, so my plan for this one is just to try to make it through as quickly as possible. So if I have to mute or anything like that, just know it's because I'm trying to not make you guys have to listen to me coughing. But today we're going to be going over a little bit of MLA practice. I do have the Al Purdue website, um, the link to that on Blackboard. So that is always one of my first places I suggest people going. But we're going to go over a few different ways that we can utilize our outside sources that we're currently looking at. And start kind of practicing how we're going to potentially be able to use them in our paper. So summarizing from them, paraphrasing and quoting, and also properly citing these items so that we are giving credit where credit is due. We're not plagiarizing. We're able to utilize and borrow from these people who are experts in their fields. But it's our own writing and our own thoughts going into our actual paper. So the first thing we're going to start with is summarizing. One of the things I want to point out is throughout this PowerPoint, I do have examples of in-text citations, also known as parentheticals. So this was actually created with an older version of a textbook for this class. Um, so that is what I'm quoting from, but the quotes are really just as an example for you guys, and it also has good information in there. But summarizing is just where you restate the main idea of a passage in concise terms. So that is what summarizing is. But as an example, I also want to show you that I have my direct quote from the textbook. I have my open parentheses, the author's last name, the page number, close the parentheses, and then punctuation. That often confuses people. It seems weird to not have the punctuation inside of the quotation mark because that's what we're normally supposed to do. But when you have a parenthetical or an in-text citation, that's what you're going to do. The summary should always be shorter than the actual thing. So, for instance, let's say you're talking about a fictional book or movie, right? And you sum it up in a couple of sentences. Even though this is an hour and a half, 2 hour long movie, you can kind of sum it up much shorter. So, it's not summarizing if you are retelling the entire thing. You always use your own words. This means you're not just swapping around a couple of things that you found um, in a thesaurus, which is something that I did very early on in my writing career. I thought that was summarizing and paraphrasing, was just changing some words around when I wrote my first research paper in high school. Um, Thankfully, I learned from that. And I learned from it. I learned about it before I turned in my final paper. Um, and you're supposed to convey the original idea of the passage. You do not use words or syntax of the original source unless you are directly quoting. Paraphrasing, it's not an overall summary. Maybe you're focusing in on something specific within the article, like a specific study or a specific anecdotal event that happened. And that is going to be where you kind of just show the key points. It's still going to be in your own words. And we use paraphrasing to just kind of simplify and clarify stuff. That way, we're not having to explain everything, but we get the important information out there. Even though it's not a direct quote and we're writing in our own words, if it is not our study, if it's not our original idea, if it is not our original thought process, it still needs to have that parenthetical. It doesn't have to have quotation marks because it's your own words, but it does have to have an in-text citation. Up next, we have quoting. This is the one we're probably most familiar with when it comes to citing and using stuff from other texts. This is where everything is verbatim, so word for word what the author has said. It has to go into quotation marks. It has to be cited in text. And we use this information. We don't want to just pull a bunch of quotes and not have our own writing in there, but we want to use quotes when the information is better in the original form or it adds authority. So it's coming from the source itself, right? So if it's important saying, an important quote, an important point with statistics that they're making, that's when we want to use quotations. And again, it has to be word for word. Now, if you are you can change things, but you have to alert your audience that you're changing things, right? So if you are changing a word, so let's say we're talking about, we're writing a research paper on art and activism, and we're talking about Kendrick Lamar. And we already know from the paragraph that we're talking about, it's about Kendrick Lamar. So we want to use he just to simplify things. We would put he in a bracket if we're replacing it with his actual name, depending on the actual quote being used, right? Or if we're using brackets to simplify something. Um, and we only do this when it makes more sense. Is the only time we want to change things, but we have to alert our audience. Or let's say you have a paragraph and you don't want to quote the entire paragraph because it's too much, but maybe the first sentence and the last sentence of the paragraph work really well together and kind of convey that message you're trying to convey. You would use an ellipses. So that dot, 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 that thing that gives us anxiety when we see it, when we're texting somebody, that is what you're going to use. But you don't have to use this if it's at the beginning of the quotation. MLA, this is the guide that we usually use for English papers. If you are writing your paper in APA, please notify me so that we can either I can record a separate video, point you to some resources, or we could potentially meet during office hours. Um, MLA is what I'm more familiar with, but we can definitely work with APA as well, if that's something that you're interested on kind of honing your skills on. You're always going to want parenthetical references. So that's that in-text citation. You always have to have a works cited page. And we, of course, want to avoid plagiarism. Parenthetical references, most of the time, it's just the author's last name and page number. This is used in text and it ends up on the works cited page. I've had papers turned in the past where there was the in-text citation, but then it didn't correspond to the works cited page, or vice versa. You have to have both. Um, Whenever you have two authors, you're going to use both names. If you have more than two authors, you'll say et al. So let's say it's written by Jolly, Morris, and Kersner. We would say Jolly et al. Quoted in, that's an option that we have. Let's say you find a source and it has a quote from somebody else that you really like. My first option that I suggest is always to be to just track down that original source. But if it's inaccessible, you could always do quoted in. And then this is another example we have down here. If a source does not include page numbers, or if you're referring to the entire source rather than a specific page, cite the author's name in the text of your paper rather than in the parenthetical reference. And this is another good example of a parenthetical right here. So, if let's say you're paraphrasing what an entire article is going over, you can just say the author's last name and say what the summary is. You're still giving them credit, but you don't necessarily have to use a parenthetical in that instance. Works cited page. This is going to go at the end of your paper. After you've done your annotated bibliography, you pretty much have most of what you need for your works cited page, because your annotated bib is essentially your works cited page plus the annotations. So whenever you are doing finishing up your paper, you can just take those annotations out and there's your works cited page. Um, it's you're going to italicize all book, um, and periodical titles. If it's a smaller work, it's going to be in quotation marks. Um, it's in alphabetical order. We indent the second line. I'm going to show you guys how to do this in class. And again, just heavily encourage you guys to use Al Purdue. Plagiarism, we talked about this when we went over the syllabus at the beginning of the semester. Just follow the rules. Don't let ChatGPT do your thinking for you. Um, and don't buy paper from somebody else. They're taking money from you and then they're taking money from plagiarism software companies. They're double dipping and it only ever hurts you. I would much rather you have an extension or us work together on a solution than you having a zero or us having to go talk to somebody. Just we want to, this is your education and this is your chance to work on something that's going to help you with whatever career you're going into. We're working on communication here. We're working on critical thinking. These are skills that we need just as adults, as citizens. Um, so yeah, just even if you don't enjoy writing or you feel like you're not good at writing, I believe in you guys as being effective communicators, and that's what we're working on this semester. Um, Consequences to those actions, of course. Um, I have this posted on Blackboard. So this is going to be similar to what we've done the past couple of classes, only we're working with quotes a little bit. You do not have to have quotes in your annotated bib, but this would be a way to practice it if that is something you wanted to do within your annotated bib. So you're going to do like we have the past couple of classes. You choose one of your sources, you write out the correct citation, but underneath that citation, um, and your summary, you're going to pull a quote from the article and then use the correct parenthetical citation. So you'll have the quote, open parentheses, author's last name, page number if available, and then close that parentheses and put a period. So this is our way of practicing, not only for our annotated bib, but also this is going to come in handy when we're writing our research paper. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see all of you guys on Monday.